Well, thank you everyone for attending my What's New in Autodesk Revit Site Planning and Design version 2.0 guide. And I want to say the reason for that 2.0 version is due to adding in the shared reference point that came out after we released the initial site planning and design guide. And there's been a couple hotfixes which resolve some issues we were having with some of the practices. So we had to release the 2.0, so make sure that if you have the 1.0, you do get the 2.0 version. And like Corinne mentioned, it was scheduled for an hour today, but it's more like 30-40 minutes. I know you are all looking forward to spending an hour with me, but that's just how it's going to play out today. So again, my name is Charisse Bidoff, and I am a learning content developer with Ascent. I develop and maintain all of the Revit guides and the advanced still, as well as assisting on the BIM 360 guide. So before this, I was a CAD management consultant supporting both small and large firms get their software set up and help them establish a workflow to become successful. So over 15 years, I have been working with, training, and supporting a variety of Autodesk software from AutoCAD Architecture, yes, that is still around, MEP, Advanced Still, Revit, Navisworks, and BIM 360. So let's look at what we'll be talking about today. So I'm going to discuss what changes have been made with the Revit site book, starting from the title, then to each of the chapters and their practices, and then demonstrating a practice from chapter 1 and from chapter 2. I'm going to use both PowerPoint presentation and pre-recorded videos to make everyone's life a little easier. okay, really, to make my life a little easier, but it allows me to narrate and give added tips that you can show your students and just added tips in general. And between you and me and the internet, I cannot draw and talk at the same time. It would take well over an hour to just get through the demos. But most of all, I want to get you guys informed about this amazing book and back to your favorite thing in the entire world, which is work, right? Now, these demonstrations that I'm going to show you are taken right out of the Revit Site Planning and Design Guide. So let's get started. So one of the first things you will notice about this one-day course is the guide name change from Site and Structural Design to Site Planning and Design. This was intentional because this book needed to focus on something. It felt like it was trying to be two different things. And with all the feedback that I have gotten, it told me that I was heading in the right direction in doing this. So I want to thank everyone who sends in feedback, whether it's good or bad. I welcome all feedback, preferably the good stuff, of course. But so just going down the list here, chapter 1 is now focused on site planning, representing a more realistic workflow. So I encourage anyone training from this guide to go through it first, as the workflow has changed, as well as some changes to the practices. Now, I have seen many different workflows over the years on acquiring and publishing shared coordinates and teaching it. But my purpose here is to break it down and to simplify things as much as possible. The Revit coordinate system and acquiring and publishing shared coordinates is complicated enough and is one of the most hardest concepts to master because it's not something you use or do every day, right? You set it up at the beginning of a project and maybe set another one up, months, even years down the road. So it was crucial to get this right and explain each process so that you have something to come back to for reference when you do start your next project. So here I have added linking files and managing linked files and exporting your Revit project, because these are crucial in the process, especially with linking files and making sure the positioning is correct. I mean, sure, that's more of a fundamental class or guide topic, but dealing with shared coordinates, linking and linking settings is very crucial to understand. And then chapter 2 is more focused on site design, like creating topo surfaces, building pads, grading, annotation, and adding those site components. And of course, the newly added cut and fill. And then moving the structural tools to chapter, moving the structural tools chapter to the appendix allows me to focus. It's refocusing the book, but with it there, you still have the option to show a few tools if needed. But overall, the structural tools never really coincided with the site information of this book. So really, it's almost taken from the Revit Structural Fundamentals book, which is also available. So moving on, since this book is only 2 chapters, I'm going to break it down and look at each chapter and what's new within them. So chapter 1 starts out with preparing a project for site design. This was something that was missing from the previous book and to me felt extremely important as a starting point. And then after that, I wanted to cover Revit terminology with regards to site planning, because you cannot properly understand Revit coordinate systems and shared coordinates without knowing what the tools are and what Autodesk is referring to and how it relates to the real world. I elaborate on Revit's coordinate system, explaining what survey, project, base point, and essentially what they're doing in the project, as well as the newly uncovered internal origin. And I say uncovered because it's always been there, we just could never see it or have the option to turn it on or off. I then make sure to cover the various tools like identifying the coordinates or resetting the project base point or survey points. When working with site plans, it is important to understand how to link and import files, as well as managing those linked files. And of course, exporting your model correctly for the surveyor or civil engineer with the proper units and coordinate settings. I have added repositioning linked Revit models and relocating the project. That was something that was important to understand, as well as just in your everyday common workflow. Repositioning the host model relative to the survey points. For instance, if you were given the survey point location from the civil engineer or surveyor, and you wanted to align your building model and levels to the given coordinates, or after linking in the site plan, you need to line that up with your building, or just even after acquiring the site plans and linking other files in and getting that all lined up. It's crucial to know those things. And then I have added a section on the Autodesk Shared Reference Point add-in. Now, we typically shy away from putting add-ins in the book because they are not consistent, and when they come out, it varies, and sometimes they just disappear from the next release lineup. So, but I really like this one. And it has been out, now don't quote me, since version 2012. And also at this year's Autodesk University, I don't know if anyone went to that, but I did demonstrate this tool in my co-presentation of BIM 360 design, Revit and Civil 3D collaboration. Now, the reason I have added this to the book is if you have a civil engineer or surveyor who has installed this add-in and knows how to use it on the Civil 3D side, it can make your life on the Revit side much more fluid and easier. With that being said, that is always important to know how to utilize and work with Revit shared coordinates. Even though I have utilized this add-in before in projects, it was still crucial that I understand Revit coordinates and how to share and publish the coordinates properly. And as with all add-ins, they are typically upgraded to the next version last, so we should never truly rely on them. But this one seems to have a long history, and I'm really surprised it hasn't been incorporated into the software as a tool that you don't have to install. So I do want to show you just a clip from the AU recording of me using this add-in. The entire process was done via BIM 360, but this add-in can be used using a file-based work share model. So I just wanted to show you it. I do in the book show you pretty much what you'll see here, other than setting the levels. So here, if you've ever done the Revit Architectural Fundamental book, this is the school from that. So what I've done is I've duplicated the site plan and created a True North and Project North site plan, just so I can actually work from the site plan in a rotation that I understand. So from the add-ins, just import shared coordinate tool, and I pick the base point and the quasi-north that were established by the civil engineer. And then from here, I'm going to select that XML file that the civil engineer created in Civil 3D. And notice that it's called school, and that is what you're going to basically utilize. So you'll always see that when, and I'll show you here in a second. So here you're confirming that you want to create that new shared coordinates called school. And then the next one actually confirms or tells you that it failed, which has happened to me. So the next step is in your manage, in the locations site, you need to set that site, the school site, and make it current. I had numerous times where I do not set it current and I think my XML file is broken, and it's actually not. So you can see that it rotated into True North. And if I just flip back, I'm gonna stay in this this plan here. So linking topography. Now this used to be in the site designer, which has been pulled out of the 2021. So now the only way to link in topography is through BIM 360. Not quite sure why they did that. I'm sure we all know why. It's just to promote BIM 360. So I'm going to align that to that XML. And as you can see, it comes in perfect. I didn't have to rotate. I didn't have to do anything with that topography. And of course, syncing, always making sure you save. And what I don't show in the book is coming in to an elevation view, selecting on a level, and changing the elevation base to survey points. So now it's reading sea level. And then going back to the site plan, I'm going to link in that DWG that the civil engineer created the XML file from. Now, it's super important on this to set the units. Positioning should always be auto by shared coordinates because we've already established our coordinates from that XML file. And then you always want to uncheck orient to view and that correct lines, because it will skew that DWG and it actually kind of rotates it a little bit to where it's no longer correct. So you do get a message because the actual survey is way outside of that 20-mile radius. But once you hit OK, it does snap it into place according to the XML, which again, really great. And of course, once you save your file, you do have to save your position back to the DWG. So just know that if the civil engineer ever updates it, you need to just switch it out, make sure it's the same name. All right, so what's new with Chapter 1's practices? So practice 1A is a new practice, and it is very, very basic because I wanted to show what Revit's internal origin and survey point and project base point are doing in relationship to linked files. I also wanted to show what happens when you link a DWG file in and where that UCS lines up with Revit's internal origin. And then practice 1B is similar to the previous version, but what I have done is change the data set to an industrial park with 6 lots that you'll have to save positions to. The previous practice, you saved positions, but they really didn't make sense as to why you were saving to that position. So I think this is going to be much easier for people to understand what you're doing with that practice. So let's flip over to my video for the practice 1A. Keep in mind, this is very simple. As you can see, it's just showing showing Revit's internal base point and the survey and project base point. So what I'm going to do is link in a CAD or a DWG file, or site plan. And with this one, I am going to let it auto detect because it has no elevation. And I'm going to set it to origin, to internal origin. And I'm going to leave the slight axis off because, as you can see, it's not rotated. So here I'm just showing that the DWG 000 is lining up with Revit's internal origin. Okay, and so from here, what I want to do is show linking in some Revit models, very simple models. I'm going to link in from the practice files, a building, and I'm going to set the positioning to just internal origin to internal origin. And as you can see, the linked file, its internal origin is going to be grayed out, and then the host model is what is in green and red. And once I link in another model, I'm going to set that one to project base point to project base point. And if you notice, you can see the internal origin here floating, but when I select on it, you can see that this linked model is on top of the host model's project base point. And then here, you're going to show how you can right-click and reposition the linked model. So now everything lines up with Revit's internal origin. And that's right here, project base point is now out there floating. And then with, the survey point. So unclipping the survey point. So this approach you would take to set up your host model for real-world coordination. This is setting basically the site benchmark given by the surveyor. So I'm going to enter in those coordinates that were given. And once I hit apply, notice that the survey point moves and it's now at the top corner of the site. And if I select on the survey point, I can clip it, that grays it out. I can't edit the coordinates. I can move it, but I can't edit it. So those coordinates will stay. Now, another thing that I wanted this practice to show is keeping the survey point clipped and moving it. So I'm going to set this back to its original location, select on the survey point and clip it. So it is going to stay at that 000. And I'm going to manually move it. And I just wanted to show that keeping the points clipped, the point stay clipped, allows the survey point to be moved from really far away from the internal origin. And this, you can move it back closer to the origin point, so the model does not exceed that 10 miles radius limit. And honestly, I felt that it should be 000 because I don't want to have people straining to try and notice the difference once this is clipped and moved. You see that the coordinates stay the same. It's 000, but I can move it in closer. So every time you do a zoom all, you're not zooming way out. All right, moving on to what's new in Chapter 2. Chapter 2 is now dedicated to site design, creating topographical surfaces, building pads, grading, and then of course the cut and fill that I added. Since I wanted to add it because you're already splitting and grading the surface, which just leads to cut and fill calculations. One thing with anything Revit calculations, you always want to tell your students, you always want to know that the cut and fill calculations are approximate, and that's to be said about all calculations within Revit. The cut and fill calculations are they are approximate, and they generally provide a like plus minus of 1 to 2% accuracy. So it's just always important to tell people that. I've gotten a lot of feedback from customers saying that, are these accurate? Are these spot on? And it is based, it's all based on how well the model has been designed. And then of course, Revit's accuracy. So I've added spot dimensions like spot elevation and spot coordinates, and how to modify the base constraint to either survey point, project base point, or internal origin. And since I talk about spot dimensions, elevation base, I added how to change this for the contour labels as well. Practice 2A is still creating a topographical surface, and practice 2B is still adding a property line and building pad. But practice 2C, I have added to, at the end of it, the creating a cut and fill topographical schedule. So let's flip over to that demo and go through this one. So here you just see the site and the building pad, and then you start out by splitting the surfaces. So here we're splitting the patio, and then the next one we're splitting the parking lot. Now, I have seen people draw this out in different ways, and it's always great to show them different ways to draw this out. Reference planes are a good one. How I'm doing it here, I've even seen people draw boxes, the different size boxes, and then trim it, split and trim it. So I think it'd be great to show people different ways to draw these out. Next is the pool. Now I don't give any indication on how to do this to get the all sides 20 feet, but here I'm utilizing the temporary dimensions, which I've also seen people use reference planes to map this out, or they dimension it and then select the line and modify its location. I think this would be a great way to show people different ways of getting that in there. And the next one is, the next steps in the practice 2C is setting the materials. Now, in these steps, I have you find the material, add it to the material list, and then checking the use render appearance. It's important to let people know that if they don't plan on doing renders or looking, they want to see the material in a realistic view, that they don't need to check this. It's also draining and taxing on people's systems. So that is something that you may want to check or not check depending on how your system's going to handle that, right? Because we don't want to have people getting fancy if they really don't need to. But for me, I like to switch to a shaded view or a realistic view to be able just to show that. And I've even gone through and showed people how to change, like this grass area is extremely dark. So I wanted to show that. So the next step, we need to prepare the site and all these surfaces that we just made for the cut and fill. So I want to select everything and then filter out just that topographies that I just created. And I want to set them to existing. This step is crucial. If people don't get it, they'll get their schedule will be all zeros. So we want the topo surface to be existing. So when we come in and grade the surfaces, that is the new construction. So here I'm going to grade the patio. And what I like to do is select the points. Again, this is a great way to show them different ways. They can use the selection window to grab just certain points and delete them. But I like to select them all and then just use my control key to unselect those corners. I feel it just kind of gets through it a little faster. And especially with one thing that I do want to point out is wireframe. Switching your view to wireframe helps you see some of these points that get hidden, so you can see through the surfaces. And then of course this big monster here, what I have you do is actually based on the perimeter points, so you don't get all those internal points. And again, selecting everything, all the points, and just only selecting these corner points. Now, here we want this parking lot to be sloped. So I'm going to grab the top 6 points here, and I'm going to set that elevation, and then take the bottom 2 and set that elevation at a negative, so it will slope. Now, when we're done here, I like to switch to just the view, so you don't want anything selected, to show complete, so you don't see all the contour lines going through your graded areas. And one thing that you can show is creating that overall site plan. You can modify those points to follow the slope, but here I don't have you do it because it is time consuming. So moving on to the schedule, we're going to create a topography schedule with just the name, cut, fill, and the net cut fill. And then of course, formatting that net cut fill to calculate the totals and then the overall grand totals. Now, as you can see, I do have some zeros in mine. So what I can do is set a filter and does not equal the 0.00 cubic feet. And that removes them. So one thing I don't have you do in the practice is tile the 3D view and the schedule. I think this would be great to show people because as you select on the schedule rows, you can show them that that's the grass area, I can label it. When you select on that, that's highlighting the building pad, so I can specify it in the schedule. Because I don't have you name the actual surfaces through this process. So I think that would be great to show how you can see that interactive with Revit. Woo! I just double clicked right through that. So that concludes the webcast on what's new in Revit site planning and design. We talked about a lot. I really did cram in a lot. So just to recap on what was discussed here today, we talked about the title change, which was major, but I hope effective in telling everyone what the book is about and what to expect inside. We talked about sending the structural tools to the appendix, not because it's bad, but just because it needed more focus. We talked about adding terminology, expanding on Revit's coordinate systems, adding in linked files and managing them, and then relocating the project. We talked about changing the elevation base for contour labels and spot dimensions. and then as well as adding the cut and fill. And then I demonstrated the new practice in chapter 1 and modifying the topo surfaces practice in chapter 2. And then with an added bonus of the shared reference point add-in and showing my demo from my AU presentation. So thank you all for taking the time to watch this webcast, and I hope to see you next time. And I really can't wait to hear your feedback about the revamped site planning and design guide.